Welcome back to Book Buddies, where today we're going to be discussing The False Prince. This is the first book in the Ascendant series by Jennifer A. Nielsen, and I've heard about this book for years now. I probably even remember seeing a copy of this book in my elementary days, but I've never gone around to reading it until now. So I read this first book, I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to going on to the next series. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into all my thoughts about book one. So, The False Prince, our main character is Sage. He is a 14-year-old orphan, and he's, down on his luck until this guy named Connor comes in, and he takes him away from the orphanage, saying that he is looking for somebody to pretend to be the supposedly dead Prince Jaren, because there is a war brewing, and he believes that if they can find a false prince, and there is a chance that they can stop the war, or at least make it less bad. Now, from that premise, it sounds as though this is going to be a sort of fun little story. Connor becomes a father figure, all is well. Actually, no. And I think that's what I like about this book. What I really liked about this book is initially you think it's gonna be fine, but then we realize, no, there are some pretty big stakes. Connor, finds 3 other boys to be potential princes, and for the next 2 weeks they're at his place. He's kind of training them, making them act princely, and helping them learn what they need to know in order to fool people into believing that they are the prince. And throughout the book, we realize how twisted Connor actually is. At first you're like, I'm not really sure about him. I don't know if you can trust him. On one hand, he did save Sage from the orphanage, but at the same time, he's doing all this to the kids, and his ultimate plan is kind of get a false prince, and then I'm hoping to essentially use him as my puppet ruler. There were a lot of different stories that I was kind of reminded with this book, whether that be intentional or just coincidental, but there's a little bit of the Hunger Games where you have this situation where it's either you win, well, you're chosen as the false prince, but you have to live with the consequences of this power action, specifically Connor hoping to essentially use you to be his puppet ruler, or you lose where you're essentially stuck on the streets again, maybe even killed. And then there's also a little bit of Eragon and the Thief a little bit. I feel like Sage kind of reminds me of the main character of the Thief, Jen specifically. He's very clever, he's a little standoffish, and he's supposedly going along with this plan, but we find out later on he's ahead of everybody. He actually has a plan down deep. And I feel like the world also reminds me of both the Thief and Eragon, where it's not quite a fantasy, but it is a medieval Renaissance world, and at least this first book, it was a little bit more grounded in reality. If you go into this hoping for a fantasy, I think you'll be a little let down. There's not really any wizards, dragons, or anything that's obvious magic fantasy. Now, as for things that I didn't love about this book, first of all, I think Sage was a little too young. While having him be 14 shows the ruthlessness and desperation of the situation, specifically with some of the actions Connor does to Sage and the other guys. It does. There were moments where I was 14. I don't know if this is how a 14-year-old would act, even in this situation where he's kind of living on his own. He's an orphan. But it's if Sage were 16, I feel like I would not be thinking this. Maybe this is just a me thing, being older now, and when I see somebody who's a bit younger than me, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a kid. And then also, I did find the story to be, the setting to be a little bit contained. I think, a lot of this takes place at Connor's place, and I think especially in like the first half of the book, I did feel a little bit contained, and there were moments when it was a little bit slow, focusing on like, the manners portion, trying to be a prince. And I didn't dislike that part, but I did get a little tired at some points. I will say, once we get to the last third of this book, like, I really vibed with it because we learned something very shocking. I'm not going to spoil it because this was a really great twist that I loved. And the silly thing is, I think early on I kind of had this idea of like, hey, what if this happened? But I was like, I brushed it to the side a little bit because I felt as though the two different timelines didn't match up. So I brushed it to the side, and then it happened. I was like, oh my gosh. And I think it really recontextualizes everything. I mean, Sage was always somebody who was, trying to think ahead of Connor, show that like he wasn't gonna let Connor overtake him, make him break. But then when you find out this information and what he uses with it at the end, it makes you want to go back and reread the whole book, like with this in mind, and see how is it set up, how does this fact affect this moment. I think that's what I love about a good book, because when there's a new detail added in and it makes you want to reevaluate everything, go back in and see how it makes you want to reread the book. And I think rereadability is an important aspect when it comes to writing a good book. Overall, I quite enjoyed The False Prince. I liked the setting of the story and the twists throughout. I liked both like the mild ones and the big ones. They were really shocking and well written. It makes you want to reevaluate the whole book. And like I said earlier, I look forward to reading the next couple of books in the series. So, if you enjoyed this, please share it with your friends. I'm Louisa Hammond, and I'll see you next time.